Good morning, friends. Welcome. I'm glad to see you all in here in our new chapel space. We're still kind of learning how things roll. I'm honored to introduce Dr. Steve Beckton this morning from Facing History and Ourselves. Facing History, I think everybody in this room knows about it, but it's been important to our kids at this place. It's been important to our grown-ups at this place. Some of the people here have worked for Facing History and Ourselves. Personally, I love this combination of facing both the truth about the past and what that means for ourselves. It's something we're trying to do here at Calvary as we attend to a site of a former slave mart, and how does that actually impact who we are today? Steve's work is in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Reminding kids that this diversity, equity, inclusion thing is actually a source of belonging to one another and reminding that we're in this world together. So I'm excited to have him here. His work's important to our city. It's important to the world. The last thing I'll say is that the other way that Facing History has impacted me is that the kids have told me how to be an upstander. Like modeling that this way that we can be bravely in this world in a way that's compassionate. And so we're grateful for your work. And Steve, we're excited to hear what you have to say to us today.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It is always good to show up somewhere and see friends. Whether you're speaking or whether it's social, it's so good to see several friends out and just people I've known in Memphis through the years. It's just great to see you all, and it's great to be at Calvary. I have always had a deep appreciation for the way this church shows up in the community. You can tell a Calvary member by their civic engagement, by the way you all see the community as in one, the way you desire to bring people together. So I feel at home here because your values are in line with my values around community. I love this series that you're doing, or that you ask people to come and think about ways in which their faith impacts the work that they do. And I have to tell you, I've been doing this work with Facing History and Ourselves for 20 years now, and there is no way that I could get through a day of it without my faith, because this is just it's challenging work, it's rewarding work. But for me, as speaking for myself, I have to believe that there's something greater than me. There's a greater driving force than myself that helps me to do this very important work. But again, thank you for inviting me. I just want to start with thinking about Margot Stern-Strom, who started Facing History and Ourselves. And Margot is a native Memphian, grew up in Memphis in the 60s and the 70s, and Margot went to Snowden Middle School. And Margot would often recall as a 8th grader at Snowden looking out across the street at the zoo and noticing that the sign at the zoo said, "No, only colored on Tuesdays." Tuesday was reserved for colored people that looked like me, to come to the zoo. And Margot was taking a civics class at Snowden. You know, civics is the study of citizenship. It's the study of our rights and roles and responsibilities as citizens. It's a study of society, so to speak. And Margot is taking this civics class, and she's wondering why in a civics class are we not talking about the fact that colored people can only go to a public zoo on Tuesdays, and she didn't understand why we weren't talking about that in the civics class. So Margot, as she put it, would go home and ask her parents, who were civically engaged, asked her parents, why is it that we're not talking about that? And what does that mean that colored people can only go to the zoo on Tuesday? And Margot will recall her parents telling her, well, unfortunately, it's the law. And I think about this, y'all, it's the law. It's not just people don't want them there or people don't want to go to the zoo together on the same day. It was the law, something we became understanding it to be what would be called Jim Crow laws. So these Jim Crow laws, Margot is thinking, wow, it means that our society, our country legally sanctioned racial segregation and made it illegal, no matter what your heart said about the matter, made it illegal for us to go to the zoo together, to go to school together, to ride the bus together, to sit on a park bench together, to drink out of the same water fountain together, that our country sanctioned segregation of people. And it is in that moment that Margot, even as a middle schooler, it just kind of sunk in her head as I've got to do something about that one day. And I think it started her on this journey. And by the time Margot had started her profession, she became an educator so that she can discuss these matters with her own students. And then Margot learned something along the way about her own family's history. Margot happens to be Jewish, and Margot learns that many of her family members, ancestors, perished in what we come to know as the Holocaust. And they largely perished because in 1930s, Germany practiced these same type of Jim Crow laws, right? Same type of laws. They called theirs the Nuremberg laws. The Nuremberg laws. I'm pausing because some friends of mine are coming in. I'm just going to embarrass them for being late. These are that's Avante and Terry. These are friends of mine and that go to church with me, and I mentor these young men, and they try to be where I am a lot of times, because they figure if they're with me, they're out of trouble. So, no, these are fine young men. They're friends of mine. But and that's my friend as well, Sean Carter, that goes to church with me. So they just wanted to come be in community with us this morning. So Margot is studying the Holocaust, that event called the Holocaust, an event that didn't even have a name to it happen, y'all, until 5 million Jews and others were sent to concentration camps to perish in the most foul ways. It didn't even have a name. We called all these things crimes against humanity, but this one, looked like it needed a particular name, and that name, Holocaust, it is just with a big H, was invented, and the word genocide for the first time was invented. We didn't have that name before. But at any rate, this happens in 1933. The Holocaust was able to happen, and I'm going somewhere, stay with me. The Holocaust was able to happen because of these same laws, these Jim Crow laws in the U.S. that said we couldn't eat together, ride the bus together, go to school together, sit on the park bench together. We couldn't even be buried in the same cemeteries together. It was illegal. These same laws was happening in Germany in the 30s, Nuremberg laws that said that other Jews, in the same way that Jews couldn't enjoy the civil liberties of the society, and they were ostracized, segregated, separated by these Nuremberg laws. And when we began to dehumanize people, this is the word I want you to take away, dehumanize. When we begin to dehumanize people and deem other people's lives less important than our own, we are on a slippery slope. And y'all, there's no better time to be thinking about that than today. In the midst of these cultural divides that we're in today, in the midst of these political divides, in the midst of these ideological divides, that is so easy for us to dehumanize. And I'm talking about us on all sides and many sides. We can dehumanize others who don't share our views and share our understanding of this ideal about what does it mean to live in a civil society, the state of the world. And I think, this is Bible study, and I think that the church, the body of Christ, we have to be engaged in this moment in ways that represent the best of ourselves. Right? If not us, then who? If not Calvary, then who? If not the church, then who is going to represent this fray, this thing I call a fray, in a way that brings people together? I want to share something with you for emphasis. So imagine 6 men or 6 humans. They didn't all have to be men. They're in a desolate, cold place at night. They stranded, 6 people stranded in a cold place at night. And it's real cold. Like, you can die from this cold. It's extremely cold. And the fire, they have this fire going. And each of the fire is about to go out. And it just needs more logs. Say more logs. Yeah, you just make sure you're with me. It needs more logs. More logs. And each person around this fire had a log. Do this. I want you to imagine you holding a log. You got a log. Each person is holding a log. And they're around this fire, and the fire needs a log to stay lit so that they all can stay warm and not die in the extreme cold. Now listen to this poem. It's called The Cold Within. 6 humans trapped by happenstance in bleak and bitter cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story is told. Their dying fire in need of logs. The first man held his back. For of the faces around that fire, he noticed one was black. Their dying fire, the next man looking across the way saw one not of his church and couldn't bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch. The third one sat there in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. Why should this log be put to use to warm the idle rich? The rich man just sat back and thought of the wealth he had in store and how to keep what he had earned from the lazy and shiftless poor. The black man's face bespoke of revenge as the fire passed from his sight. For all he could see in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the white. The last man of this forlorn group did nothing except for gain, would only give to those who gave, was how he played the game. Their logs held tight in death-still hands was proof of human sin. They did not die from the cold without, they died from the cold within. They died from the cold within. So the question for us today is, what would you do with your log? You have a log, you have a voice, you have resources, you have influence, you have a moral compass. What would you do with your law? Would you hang so tight on your law because people are different from you because they see the world as different from you? And if we keep holding on to our laws, even today, we won't die from the politics. We won't die from the policies. We won't die from the ideological differences. We'll die from the code within. And why is it that we do this? I'm a teacher by heart, so I'm gonna make this a little interactive. I'm a teacher by heart. I'm a preacher by heart. I'm a teacher by heart. So you'll see a little bit of all of that. And like most preachers and teachers, we will go over time. So I'm gonna check my time and make sure I don't go over time. I want to be. I know you have service and other things to get to. So, if we ran out, if you're sitting by somebody, you know, you can share. Is everybody at least sitting by somebody with one? You need one? We got folks. Everybody good? There you go. Everybody's at least sitting by one. All right. Here's what I want you to do on my count. It's going to sound a little messy, but on my count, I want you to, just a normal reading pace, I want you to read this out loud, all together. I want you to try to read this out loud on my count of 3. 1, 2, 3, read.
I cannot believe that I could actually understand what I was reading, the phenomenal power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University. It doesn't matter in what order the letters in the word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Amazing, huh? Yeah, and I always thought spelling was important.
Sorry for the language arts teachers out there. Spelling is not all that important. So yeah, but what is important is understanding why you can read these words. You can read these words because the brain is filling in the blanks. You're bringing to the text your own ideas about what that text means, your prior experiences with those words, right? Your prior knowledge is coming into that text. You don't. It's what's already in your head. It's important to realize this is happening. That this happened to everybody in here, right? This happened to everybody in here. So guess what? We just confirmed that you walk in implicit bias. We, all of us, walk in implicit bias. Bias is not a word. It doesn't equal you're a racist. This is part of our problem. We misuse words, right? Bias doesn't mean you're racist. Bias doesn't mean you're a bigot, that you hate. We all walk in bias. If you do not believe you walk in bias, that's your bias. We all walk in bias. So what your brain is doing is curing things that are in your subconscious. Now, if you're reading this paper, that seems pretty innocent. But this is so problematic in real life if you're not aware of it. Right? So if I told you this part of my story, that Steve Becton, not Dr. Becton, who I really am, is Steve Becton, who grew up in South Memphis in a single-parent home in South Memphis that was relative, I hate to say words like poor because I've seen real poor people. I don't think I was poor because I ate every day. I didn't know I was poor until I went to Rose College, but that's another story. But as I tell you, Steve Beckton grew up in a single-parent home in South Memphis, right? 5 other siblings, my 3 brothers, my 3 sisters, in a house no bigger than from this wall to that wall out there, maybe 1,200 square feet. Your mind is right now telling you stories about what you think that was like, even if you've never been there. Your mind is telling you stories about what my experience must have been like, what that might have been like for me. And some of the stuff you're thinking may be true, and some of it might be absolutely off. Because that's the way unconscious implicit bias works, right? That your brain paint these pictures about things and people, even folks that you haven't met, that you saw on the news, that a lot of the violence in the community is happening in that neighborhood. And this is creating narratives for you not about those people in that neighborhood, and then you don't even drive through that neighborhood, because the news has made you think that place is unsafe. So this is the way bias happens in our head. So that's implicit bias. It's unconscious. It happens without you controlling, even knowing it. Dr. Beverly Tatum, one of my mentors in the work, and I read all that she writes, and she says bias works like smog in the air. If you're in LA, you know this, that they think about that they breathe in smog all the time. And so if you walking around breathing in smog, you don't have to be conscious that you're breathing in smog. All you have to do is what? Breathe. This is how bias works. You don't have to be conscious that you're breathing in bias. All you have to do is breathe. And you breathe in these biases. And these biases then become racial or anti-people when those bias turns into stereotypes, and those stereotypes turns into discriminating against people and treating them certain ways. But it all starts with bias. So that's implicit bias. Everybody say implicit bias. Implicit bias. Now there's another form of bias that we don't talk about a lot. This is very interesting. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is, even if I tell you that my story about growing up in South Memphis, if I begin to tell you my story, and then I go, hey, I left there though, and I graduated and went to Rose College, right? I went to Rose College, and then I went on to earn my doctorate at the University of Memphis, and I traveled the world speaking and all these things. Your confirmation bias, once you make up your mind about me, the boy from Westwood, your confirmation bias will not let you change your thoughts about me. You would say, oh, he must have went to Rhodes on a football scholarship. This is confirmation bias, because a boy in your mind from South Memphis can't have the academic acumen to go to Rhodes College. So he must have been on affirmative action, or maybe Rhodes was trying to recruit more black kids from the inner city. Your confirmation bias, it tries to confirm what you already want to believe about people. So even when you get new information, you reject it. So you're talking to somebody who voted different from you, and you got your mind made up that if they voted for this person or that person, we could never have anything in common. There's no way I can have anything in common with that person because I know they voted this way. And you have this bias about them that would sometimes allow you not even to have a conversation with them to begin with. And if you dare to have a conversation with them to begin with, there's no way you believe that y'all could find common ground, because your bias say you can't. So what do you do about bias? Because it's important that people know this. You have to intentionally, say intentionally. It's not just going to happen. You have to intentionally disrupt the narratives running in your head. You have to be intentional about it. So once you hear him say he grew up in a single-parent home in Westwood, stop the tape. Let me pitch pause. And then how do I get the right narrative? Ask. Be in conversation. Get to know somebody. Get proximate. Oh, Steve, I would love to have coffee with you. And I would love to hear more about what it was like for you. I want to get to know you. That's how you overcome your bias. You have to do something. Be in community with people that are unlike you so you can disrupt. You have to disrupt these narratives that are playing in your head and get out of your insular community and echo chambers of people that think, look, act, dress, worship like you. You have to get out of that. Disrupt it intentionally by being proximate to people. So this requires a little bit of a courage, right? You don't have to put yourself in an unsafe space. You have to assume that spaces are not unsafe. All spaces that look like you are not unsafe. That don't look like you are not unsafe. So this is the problem that we have, not being able to sit with this thing called bias, and it just locks us down from building a community with each other. So what says, why does it matter that we do this? I was talking to a friend about this moment that we're in, and my friend says, I'm just going to stay above the fray. Above the fray. Boy, if Jesus had stayed above the fray, we're in church. If Jesus had stayed above the fray, where would we be? You know, you remember the stories in the Bible when Jesus would be sitting with the outcasts of society, when Jesus was eating with the outcasts and with those people over there, the sinners, so to speak, or those people that were outside the norms and the culture, and they were sinners, and he would go and sit and eat with them, and then the religious people would say, why are you eating with them? Why are you fellowshipping with them? Why are you sitting with them? And Jesus would reply, those are the ones that came for the most. And in his culture, people were saying like, no, we stay above the fray. You shouldn't be with them. So what does it mean today to stay above the fray? Above the fray, I'm not going to interact with people who are different from me. I am not going to interact with those people that voted for that person or those people that supported that person. I'm not going to interact with them. Church people are saying this, that we're going to rise above the fray. In some ways, it makes sense. You don't want the aggravation in your life. You don't want to get in an argument. You don't want to offend people. You don't want to get offended, so you just stay above the fray. And I want to challenge you all that we can't stay above the fray. This moment requires that all concerned get in the fray. And so what does it mean? It requires us to get above the fray, in the fray, in some good trouble, so to speak. Because above the fray suggests that you're going to be uninvolved. It's sort of a well-intended avoidance. So, I don't want to cause harm, and I don't want to be harmed. So it's a well-intended avoidance. Above the fray, it's a disposition that suggests that the argument or the struggle is too hard, and it is not worthy of my input. It's not worthy. The risk of engagement are too high, so I don't want to get engaged. I want to stay above the fray. And I do ask you, I'm an educator and I work with education, so I'm going to put it in that context just for a minute. I ask you, how do we remain above the fray when educators are literally afraid to teach about difficult moments in U.S. history, that they could actually lose their jobs? So how do we stay above the fray when we know that difficult history is a part of our narratives, and if we don't face our difficult history, that we're bound to repeat them? So how do we stay above the fray when books are literally being burned? Books are literally being banned. How do we stay above the fray? Fueled by hatred. People are sitting in discomfort and willing to dehumanize, to ostracize, to other, even children who are different from us. And we want to stay above the fray. There is right now, people are afraid to gather in their worship places because of their identities and that they can be attacked just because of who they are. They're being scapegoated and left out. And some of us think we can stay above the fray. Listen, church people, we can encounter culture, get involved in community without compromising the gospel. You can get involved in community and people who think, worship, live lifestyles that are different from yours. You can do that without compromising the gospel in your life, without compromising your own principles. But our own principles and our own ways in which we show up in our faith, the ways that we walk out our faith, cannot cause us to other people. We cannot withhold our respect and love for other people's rights to be people. We're not talking about just like the right to do things. These things violate people's rights to be people. The rights to show up and to at least have basic safety. All right? So because of our sometimes, can I say it, our sometimes self-righteous indignation that we have the right way of doing, seeing, being, showing up in the world because we are right, then we have a right to dismiss others. Some folks, in the name of God, in the name of a loving God, people would decide that other people are less than because they don't live, pray, worship in the way that you do. Church cannot be above the fray in this self-righteous way. Don't compromise who you are, but it doesn't take that to humanize people. So as I come toward my close, I want to take you into a little bit of, I want to give you a tool. Then, Steve, you're asking me to be in conversation, in community with people that are different from me. You're saying that it's part of my responsibility as a concerned citizen to be in dialogue, to be in space with people that are different from me. You're asking me to be a Christian that says that I can encounter culture without compromising my faith, but I must encounter culture. How? The problem we have is that we have no tools. We actually do not know how to be in community with each other. And that's what I want to leave you with. I want to leave you with a tool, another handout, because I'm a teacher. And I want to leave you with a tool, a framework, so to speak. I think we have to be practical and leave people with tools. I'm checking my time. We're good. A tool, a framework, and again, I don't know if I got it enough, so if you came with somebody, you can share. Stay on that side with the boxes on it. The side with the boxes, not the sentence starters, yeah. So this is a discussion model. Now, let's say you want to encounter some people that think different from you. You just know they do. And you want to intentionally get in some conversations with some people who you know. Look, it's hard to talk about. Things are so difficult right now that people in the same household can't talk. And so I ain't talking about people in another neighborhood. I'm talking about people right in your house. Can I tell you how hard it is for me to talk to my 20-something-year-old about the world today? Because we're coming from a different perspective. We're coming from a different lens. Right? And this is a person I raised and share my values, and I'm going, and you can't be afraid and make everything taboo. We trying to discuss Israel and Palestine, and she's way over here and I'm way over there, and we trying to figure out how to come in the middle so we can have some civil dialogue with each other. My 20-some-year-old daughter who loves, we have the same values, love people, don't want to see people dying and hurt anywhere. don't believe in atrocities, even under the guise of war. We have the same values, and we having a very different kind of conversation about Israel and Palestine, for example. Same values, same home. This is my daughter, love her to life. But we come from different perspectives. So how do we come from different perspectives? So this is called the quad. This is my gift to leave with you. This is called the quad of civil discourse. Now, for those of y'all who've been on college campuses, in the middle of a college campus, you have these spaces called quads. And most of them have a quad, right? And in the quad, a quad is a place where students meet. What happens in quads? Some of y'all help me. What happens often in these quads? They party in quads. They socialize in the quad. What else happens in the quad? In the daytime. Well, they party in the daytime. They create community in the quad, right? Of different people. People are different from each other. They come in the quad. They party. They commit. They have community. They debate things in the quad. They always agree in the quad. It's a place where you can express yourself as a student in the quad, and you see all this difference happening in the quad. So what we need to do is create some quads in our lives where we could be in dialogue and proximity with people that are different from us. So what happens in a quad? In the quad, there's 4 quadrants of this quad. And in what you do in a quad is, one, you come to a quad with empathy. In that far left, you have to have empathy in this quad, right? You have to let go some of your own thinking and come with empathy. Try to see the world from somebody else's point of view. That's one corner of the quad. Let me see how yours are. Because I didn't say one for myself. So in the quad, you're trying to connect with people. You're saying, before you start debating, what you have to do, humanize. Everybody say humanize. Humanize. I see your humanity. No matter what I think about your lifestyle, how you vote, what I do see is our shared humanity. When we get to the point where we no longer see people's shared humanity, I just talk real about this stuff. If I can't, because I'm not MAGA, if I can't see that MAGA people are human, I've disqualified myself from civil dialogue. I became the thing that I despise the most. I begin to work against my own moral. In fact, I've lost my right to be right. I'm off my moral ground when I begin to see that somebody that vote different from me, even I think like, how could you? Even if I have that feeling. Y'all have had that feeling. And I'm not saying everybody in here votes a certain way. It's not a political talk. But as much whatever side you're on, and that's another thing, and that I can go into, there's more than 2 sides. If you are pressed into a binary, then you are looking at the world through a lens that's too narrow. There's more than 2 sides. There's a 3rd way. There's a 4th way. And we got to imagine 3rd and 4th ways of seeing the world. That's what we do in the Face of History classroom. We don't tell kids what side to get on. We ask kids critical questions so they can determine that, maybe neither one of those sides make sense. Maybe there's a 3rd side, a 4th side, a way of looking at these things. So they imagine things that we're not thinking about. But once you dehumanize, you're disqualified from the quad. That's how I get out of quads. You don't have to stay in a quad. If you're in a conversation with somebody and they don't deem you human, you should get out of that conversation. Because the basic right to be human, nobody can take that from you. So you got to see people humanity. And then you got to be generous, right? Have some grace. Don't jump to conclusions. Oh, no, Steve is a black man from South Middle. I know he voted this way. Ain't no way I could talk to him because I'm sure he's in that camp. He works for Face of History. He's got to be woke. You just make assumptions, right, about what you think instead of being generous, not jumping to conclusions, centering relationships. And in the 3rd box of the quad there is curiosity. Watch this. Instead of, I know what Hank must think, right? He went to Swanee. I know what he thinks. Rather than that, help me understand. What could be possible if? And what does this mean to you? These are ways in which we enter a quiet conversation. Sean, help me understand this from your perspective. What does it mean to you? Now we are humanized and we're listening and we'll find out. And then the last one is humility. I don't care how many degrees you have behind your name and all these things, you don't have all the answers. We have to show up with some humility. So when we're doing these four things, things could happen. I want to end with this story. This blew my mind. This actually happened, and you Memphians will appreciate this. And then we'll have, if I know some of you have to go to other things, and I'll stop for a question or two. But some of you Memphians, I appreciate this. I was asked, me and Rachel Shankman a few years ago, were asked to come to the library and facilitate a conversation about the removal of the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue before it was removed. And we were asked to facilitate a conversation about whether the community should remove that statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest. Those who don't know him, he was among being a sort of political figure, he was also the head of the KKK at one point. So we facilitating this conversation, y'all, and guess who shows up? I can't make this up. A descendant of Nathan Bedford Forrest shows up, a descendant of two of Nathan Bedford Forrest, and in the same room, descendants of Ida B. Wells shows up. Now, Ida B. Wells commits her life to an anti-lynching campaign, a black woman way ahead of her time that committed her whole life to anti-lynching, to stopping the lynching, the systematic legal lynching of black people. Her ancestors are in the room with Nathan Bedford Forrest's ancestors. And we're supposed to have a quad conversation with these folks. And so the first thing we did was says, do you want to have a dialogue or a debate? I love a good debate. I love a good debate, but every situation is not for debating. This was for civic dialogue. So the first thing we said, if you came to argue, you should leave because this is not going to be an argument. Half the folks left. This is true. This happened. Half the folks left because they came to argue. We invited people to the quad, to civil dialogue, to hear and to sit. You know what question we asked? What are your greatest hopes for the community? What are your greatest hopes for the community? They all shared the same hopes and dreams for the community. Never talked to each other before about their shared hopes and dreams. They get to talking to each other again. I can't make this up. Descendants of Nathan Bedford and descendants of Ida B. Wells, by the end of this thing, are in a circle talking to each other, humanizing each other, hearing each other's perspectives on this thing. They forgot about the statue. It just start talking to you. We never resolve the statutes. Like, take them down, resolve that. But this conversation became a humanized, and these folks leaving talking about they're going to stay connected and they're going to have coffee and all these things. This is what you have the influence in you that you don't realize you have, but you got to be willing to put down your own stuff, right, and see people through a lens of humanity. And if they are truly bigots, if they are truly hateful, if they truly don't care about the other human, they'll show you, and you move on. Everybody is not worth your time. But you can't disqualify people on principle. Just at the beginning, you disqualified. Can't talk to you, right? Because we're on different sides. So that's what I want to end with. Invite people to the quad. Take a chance. Get proximate. Any questions? Because I know some of you have to go to get ready for service and other things. Yeah. Just about 5 minutes of questions. Anybody have a question or comment? And I'll answer anything.
I think this is probably more of a comment, but in your portion of your talk where you talked about getting in the fray.
Yeah.
I think I'm one of those that is right now just wanting to stay not above, but just outside.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's any more than just feeling helpless. And
Yes.
feeling like there's this huge tide and there's
Yes.
just, it feels insurmountable.
It's like paralyzing, right? So here's what you do with helplessness. There's three, I'm going to do this quickly. There's three ways that you can make difference. There's individual. That's just you, your individual agency. Then there's systemic differences, like those the big boulders, change the world differences, right? And then there's individual agency differences, and then those differences that like you have some influence over, but you're not in direct proximity. Focus on the individual agency. Just focus there. Where you have just this much influence. I focus on my conversation with my daughter. Focus on the conversation in your house. Focus on the conversations that are less risky from you, for people around your dinner table, from people in your church. Like, when we study bigotry and hatred with students in schools, you know the first thing we ask them to do? Not go stop genocide, not go stand on the bridge and for Black Lives Matter. That's not what we ask students to do. We ask them to treat the classmates better. We ask them when they go in the cafeteria, that kid that's sitting by themselves. What about when somebody visits your church? I can't imagine y'all doing this because you're very community people. Visit your church and nobody knows them. They ain't been here for years. Who goes up and say hi to them and welcome them into the cliques and do those type of things, right? You know. These are the things that's in our. So when we feeling paralysis, just think about the small things that you can do to make you feel that you move some. Because we can't move the big boulder, you're right. You know, but you don't eat an elephant all in one lump, right? You just like chip it one bite at a time. So take your bite. It matters. It all matters. You begin to think what you do, it all matters. It all matters. Another question. Question, comment, reflection.
I personally don't have a problem interacting with people, but I do have a problem with the news.
Yeah.
I'm trying to ignore it, but I feel like as a citizen, I shouldn't just stop watching it. But it upsets me so much that I don't know how to move forward with that.
I feel you. I'm gonna identify with you first. I've been turning it off lately, but I'm supposed to stay informed about the world and what's going on around me, right? And it's so you just want us to turn it off. But what I would encourage, instead of turning it off, just remember that news people are all kinds. I'm not talking about any particular news people. They have as much prejudice as the rest of us. You know, we deem news as supposed to just be sharing the facts, but news is prejudice. It has a slant in the view. And I dare to say, this is going to be challenging what I'm about to say. Do you only listen to the news that shares your view? I do most of the time. Can we be honest with ourselves? I do. I turn to the channels and stuff that shares my view because I don't want to hear all the other stuff. It offends me. But we have to listen to people that don't share our views. And so the way we think about news is being responsible consumers of news. Right? Don't overconsume it. Right? But ask yourself a question when you listen to news. Don't overconsume it. What is my responsibility to what I just heard? It can be small. Small things matter. Going over to the Grizzlies Academy and reading and tutoring a kid matters. That matters. These big old things. If I see somebody come to my school that doesn't look like me, not from my neighborhood, doesn't like to shoot each other, and I care about you, and if your kid looks nothing like you, not from your community. You just said to that kid, there are people that do not look like me that care. This is how you fight bigotry and hatred. One person, one experience, one connection at a time, and we keep losing that because we keep looking at the big boulder that we can't change overnight. So thank you. Anybody else? Once more. And
I
then
got
I'm
one
gonna
if nobody else does.
Yeah.
I love that you've got strategies for us. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
When you were talking, I'm thinking when I talk to people who are about to get married,
Yeah.
like these are two people about to get married, I say, use I statements.
Yes.
Language matters because the person you trust most in the world, if you say, you belittle me, rather than I felt belittled by what you said. Do you have suggestions, or that you teach us how to use language, that you talk to kids about the way we actually use our words?
Absolutely. I'm laughing because me and my wife, we do some counsel of couples, premarital or in trouble marital, and what the basic thing we find is that a lack of basic communication skills, So on the back of your quad, and I think some of it got cut off with the printing, but on the back of your quad, there are some, we have to practice, y'all. Say practice. You have to practice. We do not naturally talk like this. We have to practice. On your back of your quad is some sentence starters. And we actually have to practice and tell ourselves to communicate differently. Like, here is a related thought. Rather than, you don't know what you're talking about. Let me tell you what's really going on. Here is a related thought. I hold it another way. I hold it another way. That doesn't dismiss your way. I hold it another way. You know, the most underused word in conversations is and. The most overused words is but. We do not have the cognitive dissonance to sit with more than one truth at a time. What's happening in Palestine is really terrible to me. And I don't blame all Jewish people for it. I can sit with both of those. It's yes and. So when somebody says something to you, yes and, I hold it another way. There's a book title that says, I don't have to be wrong for you to be right. It's a yes and we are, yeah, I hear you, but I just canceled everything you said. The Grizzlies aren't going anywhere as long as Ja Morant keeps getting hurt. Yes, and, Jerry Jackson Jr. is making up for a lot of that, though. All right? We can sit with both of those. So we got to practice yes and. Say yes and. You got to practice yes and. Here's a related thought. I see it another way. That's interesting what you said, Sean, but I see it differently. But I found what you said interesting. Now, this is very important. I'm not talking about moral relativism. It's not interesting to me if you want to kill me. That's not interesting. I'm not talking about moral relativism, say everything counts, every opinion counts, every move, that's moral relativism. There's some things that are just wrong. So when somebody just deny my right to be, to live, to be in space, to safety, social, physical, and emotional safety, that's not a yes and, that's I'm talking to you. Right? So, but when people are trying to struggle, from another perspective, an additional idea, boy, that was an assumption I made. Let's take this idea a step further. You got to practice being in dialogue. It's much more natural for us to want to change people's minds. It's a natural phenomenon, especially if you think you're right. Why you don't want your kids to think like you if you think you're right, or your neighbors? If you think you're right, you want to change their idea. It doesn't work like that. What you want to do is practice introspective and give other people space to be introspective. And then they begin to go, what happens in the facing history classroom that excites me the most is when kids go, wow, I never saw it that way. And I didn't tell them to see it that way. They came to their own conclusion that they never saw it that way. So put yourself in a situation where you can go, wow, I never saw it that way. Is that helpful?
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Right, yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Really grateful for this time. This is helpful, it's concrete, it's real to our lives, and we're grateful for the work Facing History does. And next week, I believe Ellen Kleiss is going to be with us. We're going to have conversation to continue this. So God bless y'all. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for inviting me.